Strangely enough, there's a nightingale on the cover. Let's see if there isn't some alternative meaning to that pictorialization. Andrew Motion has selected the poems, and I thought I would read you the introduction before we get into the poetry. Again, I just love these small books because they can slip in a pocketbook, slip in a briefcase, and you can just pull them out so easily and get a different relationship with a piece of poetry. When Keats died in 1821, at the age of 25, he was virtually unknown as a poet, except as an object of suspicion and ridicule. The best received of his 3 volumes had sold a measly 250 copies. Blackwood's magazine and the Quarterly Review had been scathing about his long poem, Endymion. That was in 1818. He himself had been accused of luxuriousness and effeminacy. Not surprisingly, his small band of admirers leapt to his defense, but several of them only made matters worse. Shelley, in his elegy Adonis in 1821, Leigh Hunt in his memoir, Lord Byron and Some Contemporaries, 1828, and Richard Monckton Milnes in the first full-length biography, 1848, all helped to enshrine Keats as the archetype of the stricken romantic. Now, according to them, he was a supersensitive soul who had lived apart from the world and who had immediately shriveled up when exposed to its cruelties. Now, the Victorians accepted this version of events and sentimentalized it even more thoroughly. Their Keats was a pre-Raphaelite, sugared and swooning. Oh, for a life of sensation rather than thoughts, they found him saying in one of his letters, and took the remark at face value. It suited them, as part of their drive toward national cohesion, to suppose that significant poets in the past had never paid much attention to troublesome ideas of any kind, let alone actually dissenting ones. It especially suited Tennyson, a champion of Keats, since it provided a kind of cover for his own more thoughtful moments. This polite version of Little Keats lasted an astonishingly long time, until almost the end of the 20th century, in fact. Then, at long last, the picture began to change. People began to realize that those early bad reviews were not just examples of critical stupidity, but proof of a very particular kind of disapproval. Blackwood's and the Quarterly were hardcore Tory journals, and as far as they were concerned, Keats was a dangerously subversive figure. Lower class, his father had been an ostler, badly educated, he had not been to university, and the friend of radicals, Leigh Hunt, Shelley, and their circle. Furthermore, his poems proved this in all respects. Not just in their explicit remarks about liberty and oppression, but in their very fabric, their suburban references, their luscious music, and their pulsing eroticism. Actually, explicit remarks about liberal politics are pretty few and far between in Keats' poems. There are some early pieces, such as the lines written on the day that Mr. Leigh Hunt left prison, and a few later swipes, such as the attack on money grubbing in Isabella. But generally, Keats, like his idol Shakespeare, does not come to the front of the page and wag his finger at his readers. We hate poems that have a palpable design on us, he says in one of his letters, and elsewhere, axioms in philosophy are not axioms until they are proved upon our pulses. In other words, Keats' radicalism is invariably not something we see spelt out in his poems, but something we experience at a fundamental and sensuous level. It exists in a brilliantly realized world of stories, myths, and legends, where we are continually required, as we also are in Shakespeare, to make morally responsible interpretations. It occurs in lyrics and odes, which are shaped by distinct historical forces, but which have transmuted these forces. We can see this in To Autumn, for instance, which was written shortly after the Peterloo massacre. To read Keats in this way, as a man of the world, a qualified doctor, a sociable spirit, who was in love with the world of imagination, is to do him justice as an individual and to prove his kinship with his great romantic contemporaries. It also shows why he matters to us now, as he resisted the pressures of his history and absorbed and recast them in his work. He made a connection between his own time and all time, between a particular truth and all beauty. In the process, he made himself exemplary. This was written by Andrew Mosher. Now, from the previously referenced briefly, Endymion, Book 1, lines 1 to 33. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. Oh, it will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. Therefore, on every morrow are we wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, spite of despondence, of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and o'er-darkened ways made for our searching. Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits, such the sun, the moon, trees, old and young, sprouting a shady boon for simple sheep. And such are daffodils with the green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make 'gainst the hot season. The mid-forest brake, rich with the sprinkling of fair musk rose blooms, and such too is the grandeur of the dooms we have imagined for the mighty dead all lovely tales that we have heard or read, an endless fountain of immortal drink pouring unto us from the heavens' brink. Nor do we merely feel these essences for one short hour. No, even as the trees that whisper round a temple become soon dear as the temple's self, so does the moon, the passion, poesy, glories infinite, haunt us until they become a cheering light unto our souls, and bound to us so fast that whether there be shine or gloom o'ercast, they always must be with us or we die. And another one, in drear-nighted December. In drear-nighted December, too happy, happy tree, thy branches ne'er remember their green felicity. The north cannot undo them with a sleety whistle through them, nor frozen thawings glue them from budding at the prime. In drear-nighted December, too happy, happy brook, thy bubblings ne'er remember Apollo's summer look, but with a sweet forgetting, they stay there crystal fretting, never, never petting about the frozen time. Ah, would 'twere so with many a gentle girl and boy, but were there ever any writhed not of passed joy? The feel of not to feel it, when there is none to heal it, nor numbed sense to steal it, was never said in rhyme. And this one, I know it's repetitive, but I can't help it. I always say I love it, and I actually do. When I have fears that I may cease to be. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich garners the full-ripened grain, when I behold upon the night's starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance, and when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink. Now tell me you don't love that too. That's good. Now, Keats says, a song about myself. There was a naughty boy was he. He would not stop at home, he could not quiet be. He took his knapsack, a book full of vowels, and a shirt with some towels, a slight cap for nightcap, a hairbrush, comb, ditto. New stockings for old ones would split Oh, this knapsack tight at's back he riveted close, and he followed his nose to the north, and followed his nose to the north. There was a naughty boy, and a naughty boy was he, for nothing would he do but scribble poetry. He took an inkstand in his hand, and a pen, big as 10, in the other, and away in a pother he ran to the mountains and fountains and ghosties and posties and witches and ditches, and wrote in his coat when the weather was cool, fear of gout, and without when the weather was warm. Ah, the charm when we choose to follow one's nose to the north, to follow one's nose to the north. There was a naughty boy. Oh, and a naughty boy was he. He kept little fishes in washing tubs 3, in spite of the might of the maid, nor afraid of his granny good. He often would hurly-burly get up early and go by hook or crook to the brook and bring home miller's thumb tittlebat, not over fat, minnow small as the stall of a glove, and not above the size of a nice little baby's little finger. Oh, he made, 'twas his trade, a fish, a pretty kettle, a kettle, a kettle, a fish, a pretty kettle. Oh, yes, a kettle. There was a naughty boy. Oh, and a naughty boy was he. He ran away to Scotland, the people for to see. There he found that the ground was hard, that a yard was as long, that a song was as merry, that a cherry was as red, that lead was as weighty, that 80 was as 80, that a door was as wooden as in England. So he stood in his shoes, and he wondered. He wondered. He stood in his shoes. And he wondered. And now we come to La Belle Dame Sans Merci, a ballad. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, so haggard and so woe begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest's done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguished moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose fast withereth too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I made a garland for her head, oh, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long, for sidelong she would bend and sing a fairy's song. She found me roots of relish sweet, and honey wild, and manna dew, and sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild eyes with kisses for. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, woe betide the latest dream I ever dreamt on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans merci, thee hath in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloom, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I woke and found me here on the cold hillside. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering. Through the sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, and now to the mystery of the cover. Ode to a Nightingale. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate into the drains. 1 minute passed, and lethe wards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled along age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and Provençal song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim. Fade far away, dissolve and quite forget what thou amongst the leaves hast never known. The weariness, the fever and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies. But where to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. Away, away, for I will fly to thee. Oh, not charioted by Bacchus and his pards, but on the viewless wings of poesy, though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee tender is the night. And happily the queen moon is on her throne, clustered round by all her starry fays. But here there is no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding, mossy ways. Quite a lovely poem, and it goes on, but it takes you on a nightingale's journey. Now, there was a poem referenced in the introduction to autumn, and it follows. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing winds, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press, with patient look, thou watchest the last oozing hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Oh, think not of them. Thou hast thy music too, while buried clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the red breast whistles from the garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the sky. Now we're going to leave Keats for a moment and go toward the Pocket Haiku, translated by Sam Hamill. This is another one of those books that is infinitely easy to slip into a pocket pouch or something somewhere and take with you to refresh your spirit on days where your spirit needs refreshing. Translator's introduction. Haiku is the most popular poetic form in the world, practiced virtually everywhere, with ever-growing haiku societies meeting regularly to exchange and explore. In just 3 lines, totaling 17 syllables, 575, a haiku presents a brief meditation in which the reader or listener is invited to participate, using imagery drawn from intensely careful observation. The more deeply the reader enters into the authentic experience of the poem, the more the poem reveals. Haiku has its origins in the linked verse, Renga of Japan, a genre of collaborative poetry that was popular as a kind of parlor game among the court literati of the 17th century. The opening three-line stanza of a haiku is called a hokku. Soon this short verse sprang from the Renga and became to articulate aesthetic qualities such as a beautiful sense of aloneness and restrained elegance. Having evolved into an art form of its own, the stand-along hokku was renamed haiku in the 19th century. That's very briefly a little bit about the past of the haiku. There is more in the introduction, should you wish to read it. Basho was one of the early poets, and I'm going to read a few of his haikus. Breakfast enjoyed in the fine company of morning glories. Traveling this high mountain trail, delighted by violets. A solitary crow on a bare branch. Autumn evening. Now I'm going to flip out of haiku for a moment. Do you remember months ago, I read you something from Robert Frost, and I'm going to do the best I can with remembering the words, but it was the day a crow shook down on me, a dust of snow from a hemlock tree, and saved for me part of a day I would have rued. Can you see a 17th century connection to words from a 20th century poet? Look for threads, folks. Always look for threads. They do enrich our lives. Oh, and here's one. X-rated. Whore and monk, we sleep under one roof together. Moon in a field of clover. And just to give you a little hint of something else, Dirsha and I are going to be reading a wonderful children's storybook on the first Saturday in October. Don't ask me the date, but look at your calendar. And it's about Toad and Frog. I tell you this because it's a children's story and a wonderful one. Listen to this haiku. Again, 17th century. At the ancient pond, a frog plunges into the sound of water. Not the touch, not the look, the sound of water. Can you hear it? Nothing in the cry of the cicadas suggests that they are about to die. Summer grasses, all that remains of great soldiers, imperial dreams. Do you remember another poem we read? I am the grass, I cover all. I think that was Sandberg, but don't hold me to it. Buisson, Another of these 18th century seers. A lightning flash, the sound of water drops falling through bamboo. Priestly poverty. He carves a wooden Buddha through a long, cold night. At a roadside shrine, before the stony Buddha, a firefly burns. Oh, picture this. By flowering pear and by the lamp of the moon, she reads her letter. Head pillowed on arm, such affection for myself and this smoky room. Isa, yet another poet. Thus spring begins, old stupidities repeated, new airs invented. In the beggar's tin, a few thin copper coins, and this evening rain. For you too, my fleas, the night passes so slowly, but you won't be lonely. The winter fly I caught and finally freed. The cat quickly ate. My dear old village, every memory of home pierces like a thorn. Gratitude for gifts, even snow on my bedspread, a gift from the pure land. The old dog listens intently, as if to the work songs of the worms. Before I arrived, who were the people living here? Only violence remained. Just to say the word home. That one word alone. So pleasantly cool. The blossoming plum. Today, all the fires of hell remain empty. After a long nap, the cat yawns, rises, and goes out looking for love. And there are other poets. This book is just replete with the most wondrous haiku. Murataki from 1452 to 1540. Those falling blossoms all return to the branch when I watch butterflies Sogetsuni, circa 1804. Divine mystery in these autumn leaves that fall on stony booty. Kirksha Ni from 1752 to 1826. Only the moon and I on our meeting bridge, alone, growing cold. Shiki from 1867 through 1902. Oh, autumn winds, for me there are no ancient gods, no Buddhas for me. And I wanted to point out something. This whole pocket series is really quite extraordinary. There's a Pocket Thich Nhat Hanh, compiled and edited by Melvin MacLeod, and the Pocket Thomas Merton, who is somebody I have read for ages and deeply respect. This whole series is replete with the most wondrous works. And just a very brief bit before we close about the translator of all of these. And it was Sam Hamill, who I referred to in the very beginning, that all of these haiku were translated by him. Take a gander at who he is. Sam Hamill was one of America's premier poet translators and author of over 30 books of poetry, translations, and essays, including Only Companion, The Spring of My Life, and Narrow Road to the Interior. He was awarded the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Japan U.S. Fellowship, and the Pushcart Prize. And thus ends our Wednesday flight to the skies of poetry. Join me on Friday. Joan Didion is going to be our leader then.